Ron DeSantis yesterday announced that he is pushing an alternative CDC in Florida, essentially.
Yeah, a bunch of lunatics.
Right. So he's compiling a clown car, and if we put this image up on the screen here, you can see he has like a tile of a Zoom tile behind him.
Yeah, I can't make the reference I want to.
Why are they all virtual?
I don't know.
These people be in person?
Yeah, why wouldn't they all be together breathing into each other's mouths?
It's so weird.
It's so odd. What's the movie where, it's like maybe it's a horror movie and they go to a lighthouse and there's TVs all in it?
Oh, I don't.
Whatever.
That was just a dream you had.
Yeah, sure. My just my life. That's my apartment. But DeSantis here. So that I guess those are the people in the Public Health Integrity Committee. And let's just watch him speak here because he's such a whiny little smug dick that I feel like just listen to him and think, is he going to have mass appeal? And I know that there was a poll that just came out in the Wall Street Journal that had him ahead of Trump. I don't know if I buy it.
Yeah, Trump also lost the last election.
Yeah.
I think you've continued to see people in these bureaucracies and in this establishment behave in ways that have totally squandered any type of confidence or goodwill that people would have. And our CDC at this point, anything they put out, you just assume at this point that it's not worth the paper that it's printed on. And so it's not serving a useful function. It's really serving to advance narratives rather than do evidence-based medicine. And so in Florida, the Surgeon General actually has the ability to convene panels of experts to do various things. And so we thought it was important, particularly me talking with other governors, to say, okay, because CDC will say these things, and then people will think, well, because they're saying it, then we have to do it. And maybe not quite as much anymore because people have lost confidence, but you still see it. We had to fight it with the masking in the schools because the school districts were citing CDC as the reason why they wanted to do it. We had to come and overrule that, but it was difficult because they were being put as an authority, and some people were doing that. So other governors and I have talked about the need to have a panel of experts who can counteract nonsense when it's coming out.
All right, we get it.
That are not going to just go along with
Jesus Christ.
We didn't need to play that whole thing, but it does drone in your ear, does it not? And I know that's a superficial point. The more substantive point is that I was referencing The Matrix. The other point, the real more substantial point, is that the COVID denialism being the center of what you're trying to push as a national candidate, that's a bad idea. We just saw Dr. Oz lose a Pennsylvania Senate race because he was the medical freedom candidate.
Same with Jensen in Minneapolis or Minnesota.
Yeah, I just don't see this as we move further and further away from the height of the pandemic. And hopefully it begins to be more endemic, although we're in the middle of a surge right now. Get your bivalent shot, take care of yourself, mask up, all that stuff, especially ahead of the holidays. But we're going to keep moving further and further away from the year 2020. And not many people, not enough people are going to be activated by COVID denialism in the year 2024.
I mean, they got what they want to the extent that it was within the realm of reality, and to the extent they didn't, they're lunatics and ignore that part of their procedure. What we really need to have up is this thread from Bad Stats, who went through person by person from all these charlatans and lunatics and quacks. This is a big long thread. Start at the top there. Ron DeSantis had a vaccine accountability roundtable today where he assembled various scientists and Brett Weinstein.
He was included?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yep. Who had been instrumental in generating anti-vax talking points throughout the pandemic. Can you make it a little bit bigger, Bradley?
Zoom in.
Yeah. I can't read that. Go ahead. they spent a lot of discussion complaining that the pandemic response was compromised because of the degree to which they have been censored, which I find ironic considering the outsized popularity these figures enjoy compared to the quality and impact of their papers. That's a very good point.
Great point. No one at the random CDC scientist is getting the same kind of online recognition that these cranks are.
Yeah, Jay Bhattacharya, for instance, everywhere from Fox News to Gray Zone with Max Blumenthal. And as far as I'm concerned, I would also have suppressed that Quacks, Great Barrington bullshit. And just to get to that, in this thread, I will go over papers I discussed. First, Martin Kulldorff claims that the Great Barrington Declaration he authored with Jay Bhattacharya has been proven correct in retrospect. Go down. In fact, with the benefit of hindsight, we can see that herd immunity to COVID would not be achieved, and 3 years later, the vulnerable people they proposed to keep isolated would still be waiting to see the sun. 5. The Great Barrington Declaration was widely criticized by epidemiologists at the time, but the authors often claimed it was vindicated, which is unfalsifiable considering the focus protection proposals in Great Barrington Declaration were vague and mostly already being implemented. See this link he gives here. One mistake the Great Barrington Declaration authors make is blaming the lockdowns for things which were already due to the pandemic itself. See this, and that's the thing is like there's this. They're acting as if we went like China and we're locking people in their homes. And like, look, I think when it comes to like the vax mandates for workplaces, I think that it is sad that people were afraid to get this vaccine and weren't able to had to like lose a job for it, for instance, like that. Like I would have personally started it with like air travel and things that hit the top income brackets the most and the people who are traveling most. But this conversation cannot be had without an awareness of like, oh, people were forced back to work during the pandemic, and their workplaces should be as safe as possible. And all these folks say, well, the virus doesn't stop transmission. I don't think that anybody seriously was saying that this is guaranteed to stop 100% of all the virus. It's about slowing the transmission of the virus, which helps everybody and slows the deaths. And we had 1 million of those. So, I would just recommend the bad stats thing here. And it's going to be interesting the extent to which DeSantis leans into this, because it's a little bit contrary to Daddy Trump's response to COVID, which is in comparison to Ron DeSantis, responsible.
Only because it aligns with his self-interest, but right. That's fine.
But that's I think the only reason why DeSantis might be doing something like this, because if you'll recall, someone mentioned this on Twitter, I don't remember who it was, but DeSantis, when the vaccine rolled out, made a point of having a televised or filmed vaccination of a World War II veteran to like exhibit, getting the vaccine and promoting taking the vaccine. He was, despite being a little bit delayed, one of the governors who did issue some semblance of, stay-at-home orders and closing businesses or curfewing businesses. I think he wants to be able to go into a primary and basically say, I was more vigilant on combating so-called lockdowns or vaccine mandates or whatever than Trump was, who was actively hawking Operation Warp Speed and vaccinations and stuff, getting your booster and things like that. But like you said, I just wonder how salient this will be when it's 2020, late 2023, early 2024, and the onset of the pandemic would be 4 years from then.
I mean, these are like the kinds of distinctions between presidential candidates that we were trying to parse in the lead up to 2020 on the Democratic side. And then it gets to things start to narrow down and you realize, okay, some of these branding distinctions were not that important. And I feel like we saw it with Dr. Oz. That was able to buoy him out of the primary, but that primary didn't have a figure like Trump in it, which is what DeSantis is trying to do. But it just has no broad appeal anymore. I mean, even people that have taken the pandemic seriously take it a lot less seriously now. Talking about COVID is not something anyone, for the most part, wants to do. And so centering it on looking backward, there's going to be a lot of backwards-facing presidential campaigns on the Republican side, including Trump's, which will be about the 2020 election. And that's at least as of today, good news for the Democrats.
And I think to your point too, it's like I think as things become closer and closer to the actual election and the primary season actually starts coming into full swing, these things get much more vibes based and much more aesthetics based than anything else.
So the whiny voice, that we couldn't even listen to. It'll
become like that DeSantis is annoying to listen to, is not nearly as charismatic as Trump, and will probably get steamrolled by Trump in a debate where Trump will basically be like, you are copying me in every capacity and I am the real thing. And so obviously all that remains to be seen, but I think I still am with you there in that as things get closer, I just think like these types of wedges just won't matter nearly as much.
I have another tweet I want to show up. Like the conversation we have about the vaccines has been totally swamped by the anti-vaxxers in a way that's really unhelpful. And like the discussion about the documentaries about like people dropping dead or the adverse events, and like adverse events about vaccines are real, and that's why doctors take them seriously and study them. But this New York Times article has a quote in there: "Vaccine hoarding cost more than 1 million people their lives, according to a recent study in the journal Nature Medicine. To avoid a repeat of this tragedy, every region in the world must be able to make its own vaccines." That's the lives that are being cost by this. So like all these like Jimmy Dore, all this bullshit, like anti-vaxxers. Okay. We should thank the vaccine hoarding. We should thank the IP. Did Bill Gates save people by not making these vaccines producible in the global South? Those people, like, would 100 million people died because they weren't able to get those vaccines? What would 101 million people have died from these spooky things that you say come from the vaccine? It's speaking over millions of dead people.
Yeah. I mean, and while speaking of the dead, I mean, just to put it in perspective, I think something like double, maybe not double. I'm going to just verify this now. But in Canada, there were around 50,000 deaths. In Florida, it's like 83,000 deaths from the pandemic.
I mean, you compare your state, how many deaths happened in your state to a country. And often you'll find that like particularly like, I mean, I'll have to find my threads on this, but like country like South Korea has less COVID deaths than for a long time. It's changed now, but it's in the same sort of like within a few thousands of like South Dakota.
I mean, it's just amazing how the kind of theme of live free or die, this cowboy mentality in the United States, has been laundered by people who want to put your life at risk for their profits. And that's what's tapped into with this, is the general skepticism, the cultural emphasis in the United States on individual freedom, completely warped, co-opted for the benefit of wealthy people.
And why is it that people like Elon Musk hate the lockdowns, so-called? It's because for a brief moment, and it wasn't even like this if you actually do the numbers. The corporations got way more money. But saying, hey, stay home, your safety is more important than you going to work and getting killed, and here's some money for it. That is Stalinist authoritarianism to people like Elon Musk. It turned Joe Rogan off of universal basic income. Like, that's what these people are basically afraid of. That's what they mean when they say COVID tyranny. It's that bosses don't have entirely control their workforces, and that's why it was so despicable. I think that like Max Blumenthal had Jay Bhattacharya on that show to launder that bullshit.